since the day I was born. There were voices that told me right from wrong.
I was born November 10th, 1943 in Ethelsville, Alabama, and that was right outside of Birmingham. After Daddy got out of the military, my aunt and uncle, they had already moved to San Francisco, and they told Daddy about jobs in San Francisco. So we moved here in 1945. We stayed with Aunt Virginia and Uncle Bernice, and they had 4 daughters. And at that time, I was the only child that Mother and Daddy had. So we stayed there with them. They lived in the projects, which most people did live in the projects at that time. And it was right near the Naval Shipyard. Uncle Bernice had gotten a job at the Naval Shipyard. And Aunt Virginia, she also worked at the Naval Shipyard with Uncle Bernice and Aunt Virginia until Daddy got a job. And his first job was at Stanford as a lab technician. He took care of all of the experimental animals in the lab, and then he got a job as an electrician's apprentice at Hunters Point, and they taught him how to do the electrical wiring on the submarines. And so he moved up in the job, and we were able to buy our first house. Mother did day's work. They used to call it day's work, where they would go to someone's house, and she would go to someone's house and work a few hours, and she would get paid by the day. And she worked for 2 sisters, the Pages and the Guggenheims. And one summer, Mrs. Page's family, I can't remember if it was Page or the Guggenheims, one of the families were going away for the summer, and they paid Mother for the whole summer, which was $500.
Wow.
And that's how we were able to. She put that money on that first house,
Wow.
on Locust Street. The house cost $7,000,
Wow.
and she put the $500 down.
Wow.
And that came from her job as a doing day's work.
So, Lobus, do you remember what year approximately that was? It's 45 when you moved.
We moved to Lobus Street in 1957. When I was about 4 years old, we lived in a place called Crocker, Amazon. It's right there on Geneva. It's a park now, but it used to be a housing projects. All the housing projects were really nice during that time, and that's where most blacks stayed. And we lived at Crocker, Amazon, and I can remember that's where I started school. That's where I started kindergarten. I remember Daddy taking me to school. And
the first time going to school?
I remember him taking me to school, walking, because we didn't have a car then. We didn't have a car. And my kindergarten teacher's name was Mrs. Gray. But I can't remember any other teachers after that. In other places too.
Yeah.
But I mentioned Lobus because that was a milestone for us to get the first house. But yeah, I do remember living. We lived in several different projects. We lived after Crocker, Amazon. We moved to Double Rock, and that's where Candlestick is now. And then we moved to, every time Mother would have another baby, we'd have to move because the family was growing.
Yeah.
And then we moved up on the hill. Oakdale. We moved to Oakdale, and then Aunt Virginia and Uncle Bernice bought a duplex on Grove, and we lived in one of the flats. They used to call it flats. There was a flat on the bottom and a flat on the top. And after, from there we moved to Loba Street. But I just had a thought. Before all of that, we lived in another flat on Hemlock. And that's when I was about 5 years old. And the Cades, I don't know if you remember the Cades.
Yeah.
Yeah, they lived on one flat and then we lived on the other.
Oh, okay.
That was the Herbert and Harold Cade, their sons. Those were my very first friends. You know, baptized at Providence. And Calvin Jones Sr. and Daddy were ordained deacons together. That's a picture of me cutting the ribbon for the second church that we first building. We were in a storefront.
Oh, okay.
And you know how churches always have the building fund. You know, they had building funds forever, but it really worked. We were on Post Street in a storefront. We saved up enough money to actually build a church it was on the corner of O'Farrell and Octavia, and that's where I did the ribbon. When Nate and I got married and I moved to San Francisco 21 years ago, I used to walk along Fillmore and I thought, let me go over to Hemlock, because Hemlock is one of those little side streets right there in Japantown. And I went over there, and the house, that building is still there that we lived at with, I had, you know, I got pregnant at 15, and I used to, you know, feel bad about it, but, you know, I've gotten over it because I know I was a teenage statistics, but just because you make a mistake, that doesn't mean that your life is over.
Yeah.
Because I've been able to overcome that, and you know, between each child, each pregnancy, I'd go back to school, and Dolores and Philip would come over and babysit while I went to night school. So I went back to school and, you know, got my high school diploma, and then I went to nursing school, and you know, I was able to do very well.
Yeah.
Basically, I only had 2 jobs in my 40-year career. I worked at UC Med Center for 6 years.
Doing what?
I worked on the ward
as
a nurse, as an LVN. And one of my friends, Rose Larry, she was a neighbor. She worked at Kaiser, and at that time I was working on ear, nose, and throat on the ward. And Rose told me that they needed someone in the ear, nose, and throat clinic. And since I had experience, I went over to Kaiser and applied for the job, and I got the job. So that was in 1970, ear, nose, and throat clinic. And then I transferred to the eye clinic, and then I worked at the eye clinic for 12 years.
Okay. Good.
And I always wanted to live in the East Bay because I love the weather. So my values. And one of the things that I've been thinking, you know, a little sidebar, one of the things that I've been thinking about, I told you about going to grief counseling. And one of the things I've been thinking about since then is the fact that, you know, I know Mother and Daddy, it was their time to go. And intellectually, I'm okay with that. And spiritually, I'm okay with that. But what I'm grieving right now is the family dynamics. I miss the family dynamics. And so I talked to some people about that at the grief counseling, and I was able to get it out and get my feelings out, and I prayed over it, and it came to me that I have to stop looking backwards. I have to start looking forward and form a new family dynamics, because it will never be the way it was.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to try to make sure that I connect more with the grandkids and the great-grandkids, and send them little, you know, texts and emails about, you know, how much I love them. And I'm trying to create more of a legacy of love, telling people, because see, I didn't grow up with a lot of I love yous. I mean, I knew that that my parents loved me, but it wasn't stated, because I guess a lot of families the same way. I mean, today people hug and say I love you, and I think it's so important. So when you talk about, I know we're getting ahead of, but you're talking about a legacy. That's the legacy that I would like to pass on to my family, is the legacy of love and forgiveness, and just to be okay with whoever you are.
Yeah.
Because we're all different. We all have different identities.
Yeah.
And we have to embrace everybody. We don't have to always meet in one central place.
Yeah.
There's not one central place anymore. And that's it. But I think, well, you know, and like I said, the grief counseling, that helped me sort it out. And that's been recent. That's why I've just finally figured it out.
Right.
That, because, you know, I'm going around, oh yeah, I'm fine, you know. I do miss Mother, but I'm fine. But I had to get down deep and see exactly what made me sad. When I was having a problem, I would call Mother, and I didn't even have to tell her what was going on. But I felt better. I felt better just talking to her, because she would always be pleasant, and always have something really good to say, you know. And you know, she lived here for 2.5 years, so she was able to meet a lot of my friends, and you know, she participated in the church, and people still talk about the effect that she had on them, you know, because you know, she had dementia, but she could recite the scripture. You know, she knew her scripture, and when people talk about her with her hats on and walking in the church and her head up, and just you know, she was inspiring. And I think we don't always have that in today's people, because people are struggling, and some people have never even felt or been exposed to what we were exposed to. You see so many people that are estranged from their family members, that people are not speaking.